I am so excited to have Dana K. White here. She is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, a blogger, podcaster, speaker, and much to her own surprise, a decluttering expert. And so Dana just recently published a book called Organizing for the Rest of Us, 100 Realistic Strategies to Keep any house, you guys, under control. And she's here to help us with decluttering and organization. Welcome to the podcast, Dana.
Thanks so much for having me on. This is fun.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. And, back in the days when I was struggling with organization and messy house, I used to read books about how to change. But most of books, I remember thinking, I don't think these people ever really struggled with being messy. And that would be my first question to you. Are you one of those people that's just always been neat and tidy all your life?
Absolutely not. So my story is that I was messy from birth. I mean, like I was the kid with the messy room. I was the teenager who, I opened up my locker at school and everything fell out. Like who knows what was molding in the bottom of my backpack, all that, so I was born messy, but I always assumed that at the next phase of my life, it would all just magically go away. Like I would suddenly be organized. So, I thought, okay, well, once I actually live in an apartment on my own and it's really, my responsibility. Okay, well, then I'll do it. Well, that didn't work. Once I get married, then I'll care enough, no, that didn't work. And then I always assumed that once I became a stay-at-home mom, obviously, what else was I going to have to do? Right. And so it never occurred to me that even though I'd been messy my entire life, that at that point I wouldn't be cured. Well, now I know that most people, even if they used to be organized, then struggle after they have kids, so it definitely didn't magically go away. And so I really thought, okay, well, there's obviously something wrong with me because really any organizing advice that I read, I was just lost. Like, I was like, what? I felt like I had this starting point that was, 50 feet back from what the starting point was that people were assuming, when they were writing these things. And so yeah, I basically just thought I was blogging back in 2009 as a practice thing. It was anonymous. I didn't want anybody to know about it, but I wanted to write. And so I was like, I'll learn about blogging while I get my house under control. Never thought I would actually write books about this because I am not naturally organized. In fact, I am naturally very messy, so yeah, that was a really long answer to your question of was I organized from the beginning? Absolutely not. And I always say that most organizing advice is written by organized people and their brains do not work the way that my brain works. So I was always lost when I was reading this stuff. And so, I've just had to battle through it. It's still a struggle. It's a lifelong struggle for me. But I figured out what works and how to break through,
Yeah, I love that. And the name of your blog or your website is A Slob Comes Clean.com, right? So you've learned it. And that's who we want often to help us with our problems. Somebody who's been right where we're at, struggle with the same things we've struggled with. And then they've kind of found a way to become more victorious in that area of their life. So what was it? I know, like if you go to your YouTube channel, and I think, you also have a podcast, you talk about the container principle, which I thought was just phenomenal. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I call it the container concept. And basically it's just explaining reality because it was a reality that I used to not grasp, and not grasping this reality was a big reason why my house was constantly out of control. And that was, so I was decluttering. Like I didn't know what to do, but I was like, I'm just going to start getting stuff out because, my house is a wreck. And as I was doing that, I was thinking one day about the word container, and it just hit me that the root word of container is contain. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I had always thought of containers as things that you put stuff in. So I knew organized people loved containers, but I would try to buy the same containers that they had. I would bring them home and it never looked the way that theirs looked. And I was like, what is it that I'm not getting here? And I realized that a container is meant to serve as a limit. Like, firefighters contain a fire, they create a boundary. As long as they can keep the fire inside that boundary, then they can keep it under control. But if it goes outside of that boundary, then bad things happen. And I was like, oh, so a container is meant to serve as a limit. And it just changed everything for me, because I had always decluttered in a way where I was assessing whether something deserved to be in my home. Okay. Like, or like whether something had value, if it was good, if it was useful, if I might ever, did I like it, whatever. And those questions, basically the answer was always yes. Like I liked my stuff, and I'm like, well, of course I want to keep this, but I was keeping more than could actually fit in my space. And so I realized, okay, well, a container, a bucket for pens, that's the limit. And if I have more than will fit in this space, it's not possible to keep it under control. And when I thought of it that way, then it lets the container itself make those decisions for me. So I'm not asking, does this crayon have value? Could it be used? Would I ever need it? Whatever. Instead, I'm just saying, does it fit? And when I ask myself that question, it lets me put my favorite ones in first. And then I'm somehow in my brain, I'm able to let go of what doesn't fit, because I'm not rejecting that item. I'm not saying it's not valuable. I'm simply accepting the reality of the space that I have. And when I realized containers are meant to contain, I realized also that every space within my home is a container. So like, the bucket may determine how many pens I can keep, but then the size of the shelf that I put that bucket on, that determines how many buckets I can have. Because I used to just be like, oh, well, that bucket's full, I better go buy 5 more so I can have room for all my pens. But then I would go to put it on the shelf and it wouldn't fit on the shelf, and the size of the room determines how many shelves I can have. And my house itself is a container. It's a limited space. And when I will declutter down to where I only have what will fit easily and usably in that space, then I'm able to keep my house under control. And it really just changed everything in how I thought about my stuff and how I realized, oh, okay, what I was doing before, just bringing more stuff in and bringing more stuff in, there was never any hope of it being under control, because it was more than could actually fit in my space usably.
Yeah. I think that was it for me too. Just realizing if you have too much stuff, there's no way you can keep it organized. So sometimes the problem is too much stuff. Like I just got back from maybe a 16-day tent camping trip from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Portland, Maine, in a car without a top carrier, no trailer, no camper, and 10 months of belongings in there. So our car was so stuffed with things that we need for each of our rotations where we're going to be working. There's no way we could keep it organized. So I try to keep all the tent camping stuff and the camping equipment up front, but our car was a disaster the whole time. So it just helped me see your principle in real life. If you have too much stuff in a car or room, you can organize all day, but it's just going to go back to being messy again because you have too much stuff.
And there's another factor too, and that is we each have our own clutter threshold, meaning what one person can handle in that car, that limited space. Some people can have more stuff and keep it under control. And then some of us, me, can't have as much stuff and keep it under control. So like my mom has a very high clutter threshold. She grew up on a farm 30 minutes from town. So she has the mentality that she's got to go ahead and have everything she might need for any situation, but she can keep it under control. Like it's not in piles. It's not, doesn't look like an explosion happened in her house, she has a lot of stuff, but it's neatly put in place. She knows where things are. She'll put things back after she gets one thing out. So I inherited this thought process that I needed to have everything I might ever need, but I didn't inherit her clutter threshold, meaning I didn't realize there was no hope of me ever being able to handle that amount of stuff. And so I was bringing stuff in, not understanding the container concept, not understanding that I was bringing in more than I could have in my house for anybody, but also I can't handle as much stuff. And so the less stuff I have, the neater my house stays, overall.
So do you mean when you say you can't handle as much, does that mean you're not the type of person who will put it back away or?
Right.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's people who will put it back away. Some could possibly have more stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and part of that's just self-acceptance, because I used to be like, I should be better at this. I should just do this. And yet my reality is, because I am a highly creative person, I throw myself into projects. I get very distracted very easily. And a lot of the things I do in life, I'm able to do because of those qualities. Okay. I mean, like, and so they're not bad qualities, but they also don't handle a lot of stuff very well. So like, for example, one of my things that I started doing, which a lot of people do now, which is funny to me, but, and we'll say this is life-changing, is I store my food storage containers, like your Tupperware, your whatever, with the lids on. Oh, yeah. So,
I do
most,
too.
Right. And most organizers will recommend, don't even think of doing it that way. And they will recommend, oh, but you can keep more if you will store the lids and the things separately. And they have all these crazy systems. My mom always had these elaborate products and systems for storing all of that stuff. So she had so many food storage containers, and because she could get just the right lid out. And if 4 of them fell out when she did that, then she would just put them all right back and then get, and so that's fine. That's great. She can handle it. I am the type of person who, when I am putting food away, that's like the last thing I want to be doing right now, And so I'm usually in a hurry and I'm like, and so digging around for all that, it just always ended up with this huge mess. So even if I would get it all neat and nice, I couldn't keep it that way. So for me, I'm like, I'm just going to store it with the lid on. It forces me to have less, which is great. I don't need as many. The more I have, the more moldy things I have in my fridge, so it's better for me to not have as many food storage containers. And that way my personality is such that grabbing one thing, like the lid and the container are already together, just grabbing that really quickly. That just fits so much better for me, and it maintains the space, right? So like, that's the goal, is for the space to be maintained. There's nothing wrong with me just not having as many. I don't have to feel like a failure because, oh no, I wish I would just put it back. Let me just do it in a way that actually works for my personality.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I know in this new book, which I think is really great, you talk about why it's so hard to organize, and you talk about layers in that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I used to think that organizing was what I needed to do when my house was a disaster. Like, I just would look around and think, oh, I've got to get organized. So I've got to get organized. When in reality, what I needed to do was declutter, and decluttering and organizing. Yeah. Decluttering and organizing are not the same thing. And I always assumed that they were. And so when I would think, okay, I got to get the space under control, I would start by trying to make this big plan for things, where I thought I was giving up in the beginning by saying, I'm just going to declutter. That's how overwhelmed I am. That's how far gone I am. I'm just going to get stuff out. Like, I felt like, this is not enough. But by decluttering, I achieved the things I had always wanted from organizing. Like, my house looked better, it functioned better, it felt better, just because I had gotten all this excess stuff out. And it was like, oh, decluttering is the thing. Like, that is the actual thing. And sometimes you can get away with not even technically organizing just by getting out the excess, And so the layers of a clean house, though, is where I used to think, okay, it's time to clean my house, but I hadn't been doing daily tasks, and so I would think, okay, I've got to clean my house. I got to start in the kitchen because that makes sense. And I wasn't just doing the dishes. I was catching up on like a full week of doing the dishes, or whatever. Like, I was catching up on the things that I should have been doing every day, but I didn't realize. I always thought of those as cleaning. I didn't know that's a separate thing from daily tasks. And so cleaning was catching up on the daily tasks. And then it was moving all the stuff out of the way so I could actually get to surfaces to clean, which means decluttering, right? Like, I was just moving stuff around. So when I realized this, I realized it by doing, I had the very first thing I did when I started what I call my deslobification process is I started doing the dishes every day. I was like, I don't know, but I know other people don't have piles of dirty dishes in their sink all the time, like I seem to. So like, I'm just going to focus on that. And it was amazing the impact that had on my house. And so I got that done. I got some basic things under control that I was doing on a daily or almost daily basis. And then I was decluttering my house and I realized, oh, okay. When I'm keeping up with dishes, when I'm keeping up with doing 5-minute pickup, so there's not just stuff everywhere, when I have actually decluttered and gotten the stuff that has no place out of my house, then when I say I'm going to clean, all I have to do is clean. Like I don't have to first catch up on all these other things or move stuff around. And I was like, this is what other people are talking about when they say cleaning, because I was thinking when I would hear people say, oh, I never clean or whatever, I'm like, but your house looks great. Well, it's because they were keeping up with daily stuff and they were, they didn't have a bunch of clutter in their house. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's 3 separate things. And when you don't realize it's 3 separate things, cleaning feels impossible because you're actually catching up on daily stuff and moving all the clutter and all that kind of stuff. And so getting to cleaning is just so daunting.
So what are the 3 layers in a nutshell?
The 3 layers are the daily stuff.
Daily
That's
routines.
The first layer, daily routines. And then the second layer is clutter.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the third layer is the actual cleaning.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I think the declutter can help us with the cleaning. Like it's so interesting in this little apartment we're living in now. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. There's like 4 bowls, 4 tiny little glass saucers, 4 big glasses, 4 medium glasses. Like there are so few dishes in here. I don't even think I can fill up the dishwasher to run it. I'm going to have to run the dishwasher before it's full. And if you declutter and have less in your house, it's never overwhelming.
Yes.
In fact, exactly. When we got here, we put we have our clothes in little zip, or I don't know, they're little clothing containers, whatever, soft ones. We had to stuff a bunch of them underneath the bed because there's not enough closet space or cupboard space to keep all of our clothes out. So we're just not going to use those clothes while we're here. So
it's great. Good for you.
It's an interesting way to live life and kind of experience, I don't know, decluttering. And really, in some ways, you're talking about minimalism, aren't you?
So when I started in 2009, I hadn't really heard the buzzword minimalism. I think it was maybe a year into it that I was starting to hear people talk about minimalism. I just knew my house was out of control. I had to get it under control and I was decluttering. I think that there is a lot of value in minimalism. And what you're talking about, yes, the less stuff I have, the easier my house is to keep under control. And so that whole clutter threshold thing of, oh, okay, we're in a busy season of life. I need to have less stuff because that makes it easier to do that. So yes, it's a thing. And yet, because my target audience is me in 2008, like that's basically how I think of things, because that's who I am here to really walk alongside of, which obviously there's all kinds of people who in different stages of things, that are part of my community, but I don't focus on the word minimalism because I know where I was with so much junk in my house. The thought of minimalism, I'm like, okay, I can't get from here to there. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so it was just too overwhelming. I'm also kind of a jump in overboard kind of a person. And so it's like that extremism of, like all this stuff, I'm going to have no stuff. Well, then I would like start trying and then be like, okay, I can't ever do that. And so I just give up, so it's more like much more of a where you are right now. And let's take one step forward. And then let's just take one more step forward and let's take one more step forward. And so while minimalism is for a lot of people kind of what they end up getting to, it's not what I focus on and what I teach because because I'm like, I'm going to hold your hand here in this extreme of how much stuff you have and let's get you better. Where sometimes when we focus on minimalism, then it feels too far in the future. And so there's a tendency to want to give up. Does that make sense? I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling there.
That makes real sense.
Yeah.
And I think at 2 stages in my own life, one was when we were first married, before we had kids, we were living in a 2-room apartment. Each night we flattened out the couch to sleep. And we were such messies. Our like floor of our apartment was just covered in stuff. And one day the landlord came over and I was so embarrassed by how messy it was. That influenced us in choosing a different apartment because I didn't want to face him again because we were so messy. And then think back to, when I had young kids and it just seemed overwhelming. Like, I mean, everything overwhelming. So if you take me at either of those spots, or anybody listening has had similar times in their life, how do you even start when you feel so overwhelmed?
So let's change the goal. Kind of like we were just talking about with, if the goal is minimalism and you are drowning in stuff right now, then, like it just is like, I don't even know where to start to get to that point. So we don't worry about that point. Instead, my goals are, I'm going to make this space better. And there is literally no way to fail at better if I do anything. Like I can literally remove one piece of trash and this space will be better, which means I've achieved the goal of better and I've been successful. Okay. And just changing that goal means that there's nothing daunting. I am just going to focus on making this space better. I'm going to focus on having less in this space than I did before. So my whole 5-step decluttering process is based on that. Okay. Which is, I am going to make this space better than it was before. I'm going to have less. And as long as there's less, I will count it as successful decluttering. I'm not going to be done, but it'll be better. And so the process is designed for me to never end up with a bigger mess. I never pull everything out of a space like most people will tell you to do when you declutter. Instead, I go one item at a time and I make a final decision about that item, which the process talks you through that. But I count it as, okay, if I remove 6 things and then I get distracted, life happens, you've got little kids, your energy's gone, whatever it is, and I step away from this space, the space is better than it was before. I'm not leaving anything for later, which means I can work in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If I end up having the energy, I could go for 5 hours using the same process and I will have made huge progress, but it's that really making the goal, instead of done, making the goal better. And so many times when the goal is done, I never get started because I think, well, I got to set aside a huge amount of time.
Right. A lot of people think that.
Yeah. Or I just don't have it in me right now. I'm just emotionally exhausted. I mean, aren't we all emotionally exhausted after the last 2 years? I mean, really, like the decision fatigue is so intense these days. And so it's like, I'd rather just not do that. But instead, if you can say, well, that's not my goal. Done is not my goal. I want to get there eventually, but I'm going to make my goal better and less. Well, then there's nothing to lose. I might as well go ahead and get started. And that getting started is everything for the person who's overwhelmed.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said in your book. I think what's in this book, Organizing for the Rest of Us, that don't necessarily start on a closet or a drawer you can't see. Start on what's right before you and what's messy, like that you see. Is that right? Was that in this book?
Yes, absolutely. So I call it the visibility rule. And I had to come up with some sort of a way to figure out what to work on next because my whole house was a disaster. Right. And so I needed to find a way to prioritize because that's where I always felt like, I'm like, well, I got to work on this. Oh, but there's this. Oh, but there's this, and so then I would never really make any progress, never gain any traction. And so I came up with the visibility rule because my tendency was what most people's tendency really is, which is to go to that master bedroom closet or, I'm going to do this junk drawer or whatever. But the problem with that is you spend all this time working in that space and you think, okay, well, good. No, we don't really use this space. So maybe it'll actually stay decluttered and that'll be worth it. But then in reality, you don't ever use that space. So it's not actually improving your overall function in your home and you're not seeing that progress. And so like the most defeating feeling is when, somebody comes home, either somebody who lives in your house or somebody stops by and they're like, what have you been doing? And you say, well, I've been decluttering all day. And you see their eyes like dart around the room and you can read their mind as they're thinking, really, you've been decluttering all day. Okay. And that is so defeating. And yet that's the type of thing that would happen. As my husband would come home, this is in the olden days, before I had figured out this kind of stuff, and I'd be working. I'd be like, here, come with me. Look, do you see anything? Do you see the difference?
I've done that before.
And he was always like, I'm trying really hard to answer this correctly, because I know that she'll get discouraged if I don't, But so I say, the way I prioritize and the way I teach people to prioritize is start in the most visible space in your home, meaning the door where guests would enter or where somebody's going to see inside if they came to your door or whatever. Start in that visible space, because you're going to work in that space. You're going to make progress that you're going to see. And then every time you walk by that space, which is going to be pretty often, right? Because it's visible, it's out in the open, you are going to, instead of feeling defeated, you're going to go, oh, that looks so good. And like, it encourages you, it increases that decluttering energy, it perpetuates it. And then the next time, start in that space again, which can feel like, what, I'm starting here again. But where it maybe took 3 hours the first time, because you were dealing with like months or years collection of stuff, now it's going to take like 5 minutes, because you're really just dealing with the things that have collected there, which is all easy stuff and pretty much just needs to be put away. Right. And then move to the next visible space, and then keep going. And you're going to do that sooner also, because of that, reminding yourself, wow, it really makes an impact on my house to declutter.
Yeah. I remember one of the eye-opening things I saw in your book is that you have to keep decluttering all your life. Because I'm the person that thinks, ooh, now I have the system so nicely organized, it's just going to be clean for the rest of my life. And I never think, oh, I've got to go back to it again. But then you also say, if you have too much stuff in one space, there's no way you can keep it organized. So what's the difference between that, where it's an ongoing declutter, but if you have too much space, that place is always going to be cluttered? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Maybe. We'll see by my answer. We'll find out.
Right.
You can always say, no, that's not what I meant. So I define clutter as anything that continually gets out of control in your home. So it goes with your clutter threshold, what you can handle, but it's like any space that's constantly getting out of control. There's too much stuff in it. Like, I just remove stuff from that. So that's how I define clutter. But yeah, like it feels like bad news to say that you're going to have to declutter for the rest of your life. And yet, when I realized that, it was actually very encouraging to me. And strangely, I hear from people all the time who say, oh, that's actually one of the things that helped me the most, was for you to say, oh, you're going to have to keep decluttering forever. You're going to have to keep getting rid of stuff. There is no end point. I'm not done at this point. And just knowing that helps me to realize, oh, okay, just because this space this space is getting out of control again, I don't have to go, oh, well, it didn't work when I thought I was done decluttering, so now I got to come up with a whole new method. It's like, no, I just have to keep decluttering. I mean, like, and as long as you're living, stuff is going to be coming into your house. Right. And as long as stuff comes into your house, other stuff has to leave, because space is limited. It's finite.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I do have one question about getting rid of things, because I feel like if I'm going to declutter, say my clothing closet, there's certain things I for sure want. There's for certain things I for sure don't want. But then there's that middle ground of things like, I'm not really sure. And I find it really emotionally hard to get rid of those things. So I actually usually with those things, I'll put them in a box in the garage, because that helps to make the break. And then maybe I'll look at them in a month or something. But I know you say get rid of them right away. So I don't know, with your method, how do you make that emotional break? At least I feel like with my method, there's a middle step to make the break.
Yeah. And if that's what works for you, that's exactly what you should be doing. Like it totally is. My personality though, out of sight, out of mind, for me to do what I know, like one of my friends I work with on different stuff, she calls it a quarantine box, and she loves it. And that's so great for her. For me, it just becomes what was in that box? I don't remember, and it just becomes another piece. So I need to go ahead and get it out of my house. But as far as the emotional part goes, that's where I let the container make the decision. So I say, I mean, I get rid of the easy stuff first, like the stuff that's like, obviously this should go, this is whatever. And, in my book, Decluttering at the Speed of Life, I have a chapter on clothing, where I talk through, like how to identify certain, clothes in the trash step or in the easy stuff in the whatever. But then I let the container make the decision. So the final step of my decluttering process is to, after I've gotten out the obvious things that need to go, is to implement the container concept. And that has two parts. First of all, it's to consolidate, which means I'm going to put all the like things together. So I'm going to put all my black tops together. Okay, well, now I'm going to put all my black short sleeve tops together and my black long sleeve tops together. And just doing that so often helps my brain go, oh, wow, I think I collect a black top every single time I go to the store, and I have 16 short sleeve black tops. And okay, and just the action of doing that, I'm touching every single thing. So it's not just this ambiguous, there are things in my closet. It's like I'm putting things together. And when I do that, that just naturally helps me be willing to say, oh, I don't actually need 16 black tops. I can let these 12 go, because these are the 4 that I wear all the time or whatever. But then, after that process, if there's still too much, I embrace the reality of the space that I have. So whether that's a closet rod, I need to be able to get things out so they can't be shoved in there. And I'm just going to pull out my least favorite until I only have what will easily fit in this space. And that there's just something about using the container, using the size of the space and saying, okay, I need this space to be functional for me. This is the space. I'm not rejecting anything. Okay. So that's where the emotional part of it, that's how the container concept helps me not be paralyzed by the emotions, because I'm not rejecting anything. I'm just saying it's not me. It's the size of the closet rod. That's the determining factor here. I would keep it. I love this thing. I have so many memories associated with it. And yet it doesn't fit in this space. And so it's not more container worthy than this other item that I do wear all the time. And just that right there is very helpful. But also, with the beauty of the container concept is that I can keep it if it fits. And I am just like, it fits in the container. I know we're talking about clothes, so it can feel like we're talking about you fit your body, but I'm just saying, like, this is the space that I have. There's room for it. Even though I'm like, well, I'm like, it fits in the container. I can keep it, And so knowing that is also very helpful to me.
So I wonder too, if keeping your eye in the big picture, would I rather save every single thing, or would I rather live a life where I'm not controlled by clutter and I don't have to clean and organize all the time? I'm not feeling overwhelmed, because I think I've heard that, if you buy a new shirt, you have to get rid of an old one. And I always think, I don't really have to get a real old one. One extra shirt's not going to be a big deal. And so I don't. And then my house, my closet goes back to the same old thing. So is that how you keep it from going back to the same old way? You have to just keep that in your mind that you want an easy life? Or
I mean, yeah, the one in one out is how you maintain it. But that doesn't mean that every single time I buy something new, I get rid of something. But I do understand the container concept. And so when I have that moment where I realize this is harder for me to function in this space, I'm like, oh, it's because I have more stuff in this space than I can actually keep under control. And then knowing that one in, one out is a thing, I'm like, oh, that's right. I need to get rid of some stuff to make room for the things that I really do want. But yeah, so I was just having this, I'm trying to remember. I feel like I was having this conversation yesterday. I was listening to myself have this conversation on a podcast, that's what it was. But it's this idea of, yes, there is understanding that's necessary. The best way to truly understand it is to start going through the process. Like you don't need to figure out all of your reasons why you hold on to everything in the beginning. The first step of my decluttering process is just to look for trash. And when I say trash, I don't mean like what someone else would say is trash. I mean, like, for you personally, obvious emotion-free trash. And just doing that gets you started. And even if you are convinced you're not going to find any trash, even if you don't find any trash, you'll find trash. But even if you don't, you've still gotten started because you've started looking at your space differently. You know what I mean? Instead of first having to come up with all of the, okay, how, it's just like, look for trash, trust the process. And then the next step is look for anything that's easy, meaning it has an established home somewhere else in the house. It's just not there for whatever reason. Go take it there now. And with every little teeny tiny thing that you do, this pile of stuff or this overwhelming mass of stuff is going to shrink a little, which makes it a little bit less overwhelming, which makes you more willing to keep going. So it's that. And then as you go, that's when you're going to have more realization moments. You like in the midst of the momentum, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, I've experienced some success. It is easier to live with this. I haven't made any emotional decisions yet, but now I'm facing an emotional decision, but I'm facing it as someone who has experienced success, who has seen visible progress, who has felt how much easier it is to live in my space with less stuff. And the less stuff was just the trash and the easy stuff and non-emotional stuff. But now I'm ready to face an emotional decision because I have the momentum from having experienced that success.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I've also noticed something fascinating in traveling, because when we were in Santa Fe, I probably had 8 shirts that were nice enough to go to church because, when I'm at home, I have a closet full of stuff. I mean, I'm not a real clothes person, so I don't have millions of clothes, but I have a closet full. But on this trip, I only have so much. And when you only have 8 shirts, I mean, I had, other hiking shirts, but for nice, it's easy to see which ones you don't wear. So if I'm going to get rid of something, buy a new one, it's really easy for me to see which one to get rid of because I have very few things along. Yes. And I wonder if that happens even just in regular life, as you get rid of more things in your house, if it's easier to get rid of things because you have less, or I don't know. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. That momentum is so real. So I always, one of the examples I'll give is, like before I understood that I couldn't handle stuff, before I understood that clutter was the problem, was the thing keep making it so hard to keep my house under control. I used to be the mom who, when my kids would get their papers, at Sunday school, like the teacher would hand them papers, I would be like, oh, we'll take extra and then they can play Sunday school at home and hand out the papers to their animals. And, like that was my mentality, was like, oh, sure, this is cool. We'll take more, And then because I got rid of, because I had went through the pain of getting rid of stuff, of, going through masses of paper that we never really should have even had in our house. And I'd felt frustrated over it, but I'd also seen the momentum and how much easier it was to keep things under control, and how my car stayed cleaner when there weren't, Sunday school papers smushed on the floorboards. And, when I experienced all that, it came to the point where my kids knew that, like, the teacher would say, here's your paper. And my kids would be like, no, my mom won't let me have that. Because it changed my perspective on those things. And so, it gets easier and easier because you experience the benefit of having less, and you're like, wow, okay, I got rid of that stuff. It made my life so much easier. I like my house so much more. It isn't this Tetris game all the time, everything I do where I feel like I've got to do this before I can do that. Okay. Then it's like, well, what else can I get rid of that's going to make it even better and even easier? And so it really does build that momentum.
That's good.
But start with the easy stuff.
Yeah, start with the easy stuff. So if any of you guys are listening and you're feeling overwhelmed, you have 2 people here, both Dana and myself, who felt that way before and felt like we couldn't change, and we've changed. So it's possible, but start small. So you guys should, think about getting this book. There's all kinds of things in it that we didn't talk about. We just talked about a few things. And I think you have something maybe about cleaning routines in there. Did you? Yeah. So anyway, just a whole bunch of interesting things we haven't talked about. So I think it would be very helpful if you struggle in this area of your life. And Dana, do you have anything else to say about like where they can find you online or anything else?
Yeah. My home base is aslobcomesclean.com. Never wanted to use that word, but here we are, and it's my identity now. So, but yeah, so aslobcomesclean.com has links to my podcast and my books and my YouTube and all those places. So.
Good. Okay. And you should be able to find her book anywhere in your local stores or online, either one. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Dan. I just think it's been so helpful in an area that, sometimes we think, oh, that's not spiritual, just clean a house, but really it affects our lives. So I just think it's really helpful to get a handle on it. For any of you guys who don't have a handle on it, it will really help your life in a lot of ways.
Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, good. Okay. And thank you everybody for being here today. I can't remember if I told you guys in the last podcast, but I will be taking the summer off of podcasting. So there won't be a podcast in June, July, and probably August. We'll see how things go in August. So hope you guys have a great summer, and I will talk to you again in 2 or 3 months.